Good day. For the continuation of the lesson which deals with the issues and challenges in contemporary, popular, and emergent literature, here are the remaining subgenres of creative nonfiction. But first, let us have a quick recap of our previous discussion. Emerging literature is a contemporary body of texts that is gaining momentum in the global literary landscape, and under this was the creative nonfiction, which has various definitions. The creative nonfiction genre can be difficult to pin down because it's a broad one that includes a wide range of works and it has subgenres. Sixth of it was discussed in the first part, namely, a memoir is a written factual account. Biography is a story of a person's life from someone else's perspective. Autobiography, where the author was the subject. Narrative or literary journalism is the closest form to a newspaper or like a reporting. Travel writing consists of writing about how to travel, when to travel, and advice on traveling to input in all the reader's mind. And last is the personal essay, which is a piece of writing where the author itself shares valuable life lessons. We also discussed the few pointers in writing your own essays and the elements to consider when writing. Now, let us move on to the other subgenres of creative nonfiction. Hyperpoetry or hypertext poetry employs the computer screen as a medium rather than printed text. It is incorporating multimedia elements like sound and motion into literary works that is only possible in a digital setting link to World Wide Web pages. It can consist of words, although not necessarily organized into lines and stanzas, as well as sounds, visual images, movement, or other special effects. Although the poem may be dazzling with sounds, perhaps of a lawnmower, while the words mowing, stop, Sunday, and morning float across your computer screen in pseudo three-dimensional letters, one will have been hard-pressed to identify the use of any formal poetics. This genre is also called cyberpoetry as well as other names, for it has many definitions, and like hyperfiction, it is difficult to categorize. Much poetry on the web is basically just traditional work uploaded. True hyperpoetry refers to works of verse that could not be presented without the computer. Hyperpoetry is usually highly steeped in the visual and sometimes involves parts that are read in varying orders. Hypertextual poems are also part of hyperpoetry, where readers move from one website to another because of embedded links in the words, sometimes not returning to the original pages at all. For it includes verse with links to sub-poems or footnotes too, which is the known as poetry generators, the poetry with movement or images. Holopoetry refers to three-dimensional visual art that combines words with images using holographic techniques. An example of hyperpoetry is the compiled by Michael R. Birch for the Sympathy for the Victims of Bagyong Yolanda. In here, a lot of emotions could be felt while reading different passages and ways of conveying stories. Mobile phone textula. A literary work where a cell phone novel or a smartphone novel is originally written on a cellular phone via text messaging. Textula or text poetry is a form of mobile phone poetry that utilizes short, traditional formal verses, which has become popular worldwide. This type of literature originated in Japan, where it has become a popular literary genre. However, its popularity has also spread to other countries internationally, especially to China, United States, Germany, and South Africa. As it is originally written on a cellular phone via text messaging, the chapters usually consist of about 70 to 100 words each due to character limitations on cell phones. In this mobile phone poetry, short traditional formal verses are used in this form of the genre. It is composed of 7-7-7-7 syllable count with rhyme scheme AABB, ABAB, ABBA. Chick literature or chicklit is a subgenre of fiction that focuses on women's issues. It consists of heroine-centered narratives that focus on the protagonist's hardships and difficulties. There are romantic elements in literature because her Relationships with family and friends are just as important to her as the ones she has with other men. In short, chick lit is a genre of fiction that addresses issues of modern womanhood, often humorously and lightheartedly. The genre became popular in the late 1990s with chick lit titles topping bestseller lists and the creation of imprints devoted entirely to chick lit. This genre, or rather label of contemporary women's fiction, serves as such a large unit of analysis. It is originally defined as an Anglo-American phenomenon, starting with the bestseller novels Bridget Jones and Sex and the City in the mid-1990s. It has spread rapidly across various linguistic and cultural markets. There's a broad consensus about this being a transfer from the center to the periphery, from the original genre to numerous adopted subgenres. For the latter, the problematic term ethnic chick literature has been established, which in the broadcast sense includes all chick lit by authors or with protagonists who have other than so-called Western sociocultural backgrounds. Speculative fiction. Speculative fiction covers all stories from fantasy to science fiction to slipstream to magic realism to urban fantasy, so on and so forth. In other words, it encompasses all the stories that are removed from the reality that we are currently living in. As the introduction states, in speculative fiction, the human mind is examined from a different perspective. That which is mystical in our minds becomes real for us when we face the challenges it poses. It covers a wide scope of styles, including fantasy, science fiction, slipstream magic realism, and urban fantasy, to name just a few, like what I've mentioned a while ago. It's all the stories that don't have anything to do with our current reality to put it to the test. Flash fiction. Flash fiction is a medium of brief and enclosed stories, and it goes by many names, including microfiction, microstories, short or short stories, fair short stories, southern fiction, postcard fiction, and nonfiction. It's not just a trimmed down short story. Rather, the emphasis is on the story's forward motion in terms of both plot and characters. Its conciseness, length, context, and purpose contribute to its readability. Its average word count ranges anywhere from 5 to 1,500 words, but consensus is that the maximum tops out at 2,000. Its focus isn't necessarily on the plot or characters, though it should still have both. Instead, the emphasis is placed on movement. Each sentence must peel back a new layer that wasn't visible at first. If a line or even a word doesn't progress the story or reveal more about a character, it probably won't belong in this medium. Blog. A blog or weblog is an online diary or journal or informational website that displays posts in reverse chronological order. Here, a single writer or even a group of writers can express their thoughts on a particular topic featured prominently on a website. Text, images, videos, animated GIFs, and even scanned pages from old journals and diaries can all be included in a blog post. Blog owners can make their blogs private or public, depending on the purpose of the blog and the audience they are trying to reach. Graphic novels. A graphic novel seems to be a comic book that uses pictures to tell a story in the same way a film does, but instead of comics, it uses illustrations. This type of book is typically longer and more durable than comic magazines, and it is usually sold in bookstores and comic book shops rather than on the newsstand. It is also more likely to be aimed at mature audiences. The term graphic novel encompasses comic short story anthologies and, in some cases, bound collections of previously published comic book series, more commonly referred to as trade paperbacks. The term is also employed in a broad manner, encompassing nonfiction works and thematically linked short stories, as well as fictional stories across a number of genres. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, a graphic novel is a full-length, especially science fiction or fantasy, story published as a book in comic strip format. In history, the graphic novel has existed as an art form arguably from the time our species learned how to paint. However, the term has only been in use since 1960s, and though it's often a hotly debated issue, it's generally accepted that a graphic novel is a longer work or collection of works presented in comic style. Since the exact definition of graphic novel is debatable, the origins of the art form itself are also matter of interpretation. Cave paintings may have told stories, and artists and artisans beginning in the Middle Ages produced tapestries and illuminated manuscripts that told or helped to tell kinds of narratives. The first Western artist to interlace lengthy writing with specific images was most likely William Blake, year 1757 to 1826. Blake created several books in which the pictures and the storyline are inseparable in his prophetic books. The United States has also had a long tradition of collecting comic strips into book form. While these collections and longer form comic books are not considered graphic novels even by modern standards, they are early steps in the development of the graphic novel. And as for the criticism, while this term seems to cover it all, the graphic novel as it is known today is better served by the exploration in Michael Schumacher's Will Eisner biography. Book-length works of sequential art expanded in scope to include the biography, memoir, history, and other types of non-fiction. However, even Eisner considered the term very limited, preferring graphic literature or graphic story as it is a continually evolving medium, especially in the digital age. The term is still subject to much criticism and debate. Digital fiction. Digital fiction or digifiction is a literary experience that combines three media: book, movie or video, and internet website. In a digital learning facility, the term web-based, app-based, or CD-ROM-based publications can be heard, for these are all forms of digital fiction, wherein a computer or via the internet can read or can be read. Students must navigate, read, and watch in all three formats to get the full story from a literary experience, including a book, a movie or video, and an internet website. It often includes hyperlinks, moving images, mini-games, or sound effects, all of which take advantage of the capabilities of the so-called new media. To fully enjoy a piece of digifiction, it is common for the reader to be required to participate in the story at various points. Digital fictions are different to ebooks. However, rather than existing as a digital version of a print novel, digital fictions are born digital. That is, they will do something of their aesthetic and or structural form and meaning if they were removed from the digital medium, based on Bell et al. 2010. Utilizing the affordances of so-called new media, digital fiction, unlike ebooks in which the reader moves from one page to another in a linear fashion, in many digital fictions, the reader has a role in constructing the texts, either by selecting hyperlinks or by controlling a character's journey through the story world. Digital fictions, therefore, usually require that the reader interacts with them throughout the reading experience. And we have researching readers and digital literature. First is multimodality. To begin, given that digital literature frequently includes audio and visual elements in addition to text, we must consider how these various modes affect reading and associated literary interpretation. This entails determining the extent to which reading theories developed primarily for print can be applied to digital forms of narrative and, where necessary, supplementing them. Second, interactivity. Understanding how readers interact with digital literature requires an understanding of its interactive nature. Naturally, we engage with all forms of fiction. For instance, we turn the pages of print novels, while interactivity is often designed to go unnoticed, and print fiction or has become so ingrained in our experience that we no longer notice it. When it comes to reading digital literature, interactivity is an integral part of the experience. This is due to the fact that the narrative frequently responds to the reader's input. We must click, double-click, hover, scroll, drag, and drop using the computer mouse. By pressing keys on a keyboard or swiping a touchscreen, we can manipulate the computer interface. Third, unfamiliarity. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, is identifying readers who are comfortable with and thus unfazed by the digital reading experience. There are print readers everywhere, and recent media reports indicate that ebook sales are soaring. It's becoming more difficult to find readers for born digital literature. There are no reading groups for digital literature, as far as I know. Previous reader response studies indicate that inexperienced readers of digital fiction place a higher premium on unfamiliarity than on the narrative itself. Manga. Manga is the Japanese word for comics. It is popularly known as a Japanese graphic novel in which the word manga has come to refer to graphic novels through its literal meaning, which is whimsical pictures. It is regarded as an artistic and storytelling style where it shines. In the past, only Japanese people read manga because it's their artwork. However, nowadays, almost all people read the manga. Some good mangas have been adapted to anime where people can see manga in animation style. Manga is considered an artistic and storytelling style where the term Amerimanga is sometimes used to refer to comics created by American artists in a manga style. It is used in the English-speaking world as a generic term for all comic books and graphic novels originally published in Japan. Most manga conforms to the style established in Japan at the end of the 19th century. Although the art form has a long prehistory in Japan literature. The word manga is used in Japan to refer to comics and cartoons. Outside Japan, the term is usually used to refer to comics originally published in the same country. If in the past, only Japanese people read manga because of the reason that it is their artwork, now almost all people usually who like animation and art read manga. As being said a while ago, some of manga have been adapted to anime. In history, manga tradition is said to have derived from scrolls dating back to the 12th century and is believed to be the basis of the right-to-left reading style. It comprises two counters, namely man, which means whimsical, and ga, meaning picture. During the Edo era, Toba Ehon introduced the idea of manga. The term itself first came into common use in 1798 with the publication of works such as picture books in the same year. This manga becomes more popular when Astro Boys come up and the exposure is exploding elsewhere. Nowadays, there are a lot of manga artists that are really well known which are already creating popular manga such as Masashi Kishimoto who create Naruto, Ichiro Oda who create One Piece, Fujiko Fujio who created Doraemon, and etc. Where later these popular mangas turn into anime where people can watch the animation of those mangas. Doodle fiction. Doodle fiction is a literary presentation where the author incorporates doodle drawings and handwritten graphics in place of the traditional font in conveying the story's plot and character development. They enhance the story by adding numerous elements that would otherwise be absent had the illustrations been omitted from the texts. We might have seen some of it in our school publications, and we even draw some as well on the back of our notes usually. And the structure, basically the most obvious difference in structure is in contrast to doodle fictions. Doodle fictions follow a novel or storybook type of narration, unlike the manga and graphic novels. Doodle fiction show both text and pictures in a way like articles are written, while the comic book styles don't. Illustrated novel. The illustrated fiction or novel is a hybrid narrative medium in which images and text work together to tell a story. It can take various forms including fiction written for adults or children, magazine fiction, comic strips, and picture books. The illustrated novel refers to an extended narrative with multiple images that produce meaning with the text. Therefore, it is not a work graced by a single decorated cover or frontispiece, where 50% of the narrative is presented without words. The reader must interpret the images to comprehend the complete story. Textual portions are given in the traditional form, and some illustrated novels may contain no text at all. This novel spans all genres. Alternative comics. Alternate comics or alternative comics include a wide range of works by a single creator, encompassing various genres and styles. As a result, it can be published whenever the author wishes and with no regard for the distribution schedules of the publisher. It tends to focus on more sensitive stories and is released in limited numbers for a selected group of readers. Alternative comics first appeared in the 1980s, following the underground comics movement, and are mostly the product of a single creator. Again, in its publication, it does not have to meet deadlines. Instead, it is published whenever the author decides and with little regard for the distribution schedules. While the content of mainstream comics is often done to maximize sales, alternative comics, on the other hand, tackle more sensitive stories and are released in small numbers for select audiences. When underground comic books became less creative in mid-1970s, it became hard for comic artists to look for publishers. Those who continued publishing found that their readers had dramatically decreased. To address the situation, comic artists anthologized new comics that were artistically ambitious. Instead of the usual violence, sex, and drugs theme evidence in underground comics, they focus on developing the comic art and the storylines. Two of the earliest examples of alternative comics were Raw by Art Spiegelman and Weirdo by Robert Crumb. Both were subtler and more complex compared to its precedent. On this end, a wide range of theoretical perspectives is honed through reading literature on a wide range of topics. The objective of the lesson is to cover numerous historical events and a rich culture that has evolved for thousands of years and be able to learn from it has been presented. Some literature may hurt us, our feelings, but learning how to write our own and putting ourselves into the situation of each character in every book we read, or every book we have read, reaching the depth of the entirety of the literature is the best feeling we could ever have, for we could also learn in the process. And that will be the end of our discussion about the emerging literature and the course Contemporary, Popular, and Emergent Literature. I am Jana Denise Domingo from English 3A. Thank you for lending your time to listen. God bless.